Welcome back to the podcast where we are talking about Manchester United with Jamie Slevin. Jamie, welcome back.
Laurence, thanks for having me.
It's really good to have you. Let's talk about the fallout from the weekend, where Manchester United are in general. On our last podcast, we were trying to lay out a little bit about what we thought was going wrong at United or what we thought the situation was and trying to find a way to frame it. I think after the weekend, there's a lot of people who are actually that we've got more clarity around where Manchester United are through some of the ambiguity surrounding the club than the sureness of the other stuff that we originally had. So Manchester United at their very worst, it was actually very easy to pick out what was wrong, right? It was clear that some of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's tactics or the enactment of some of those tactics was just not working. It was clear that some of those players were not of the level at that point that Manchester United needed them to be. And it was also clear that Manchester United's investment was poor at best, or was not what it needed to be. Should we put it that way? Now, because of the ambiguity surrounding Erik ten Hag and Manchester United, how happy he is with the team, especially following these comments on the weekend, our performance was very good. I will not say it was perfect, definitely room for improvement. But if we see compactness, pressing, moving with the ball, making the counters, in possession very calm, we never give Arsenal the opportunity to press us. There's so much telling around where Erik ten Hag is in his Manchester United journey at this point. I'd be interested to know where you think Manchester United sit right now in terms of finding, going through the gears almost.
Yeah, so they're undercooked.
Yeah.
And they're undercooked, and Erik ten Hag knows it. So when Erik comes out in the press and says something quite defensive, that's the best we've played away from home, or that's the best we've defended, or we were compact, or we were great, or I was proud of the performance. I think he knows he doesn't have the players he wants. Now, there's a separate conversation about that. And in 6 months' time, that might be different with the new signings settling in, the midfield player and the new centre-forward, and Varane being back from injury. But at the minute with United, I can't help but feel like they're in the middle of their process. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they're playing a team like Arsenal, who are strictly speaking ahead of them. Mm-hmm. And my only question to you is, the game itself had United with a lot of the ball. Now that feels quite un-Ten Hag as an outside observer away at the Emirates. Do you think that was what he came in there wanting to do?
I felt like, weirdly, he's tried to make them a more transitional side this season. That's become a bit of a cliche to say about them, right? What I would say with Erik ten Hag and where Manchester United are at the moment is it's clear that there are some players who will come into the side and instantly improve it. I think Amrabat as a signing, he was just primed ready for a Premier League side. Probably Manchester United is a good place for him to go, right? Alongside a Casemiro or alongside someone else who can sit deep, possibly enabling more like a Eriksen. But I wonder if Amrabat will take the Eriksen role in this team and just do it just with a little more overall competency. If you imagine like the pentagon that they have where it's like, oh, these are your strengths and these are your weaknesses. I feel like he just widens on each of those for what Erik ten Hag wants Eriksen to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's an uncomfortable thing with Eriksen at the moment, and its name is Bruno Fernandes, because he's playing essentially where Eriksen would love to play.
Right.
And now he's having to play this deeper, sixy kind of next to Casemiro
transitional
thing.
8. Like, what are numbers in football right now? I don't even know, because there's players that are playing as 10s, but they're called 8s, and
vice versa.
Yeah, right.
But,
yeah.
But in the case of United, it's quite obvious that the way they want to play, which this year is transitional, is a bit of a compromise. It's Ten Hag going, we don't actually have the players to play Ajax ball, to call it, like what he did at Ajax.
Interesting.
Which was a little bit higher pressing than United have been, and definitely more
intense.
More short
controlled.
passing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think when he comes out and is as defensive as he is, it's because he's recognising they're half-baked. Now, the job for United fans, and there's United fans listening who will cringe at this, because it's been a long while since they've had real success, they need another 2 transfer windows, minimum. Because
2?
Yeah, well, because they're...
January's not really real.
Well, that's the thing, right? But also, I think once they get an 11, and it's like, oh, this is what Ten Hag wants to do, they'll then be at the stage of development Arteta took Arsenal to, which is, oh, this works until we get an injury. So they're kind of, if you like...
Aren't they there already, in a way?
No, and I think you can see it because of how transitional they are. They're accepting we can't really dominate games and impose ourselves, but here's Marcus Rashford, and here's Garnacho, and here's not Jadon Sancho.
Yeah, Jadon Sancho's not visible. And on top of that, I guess there's also this moment of brief excitement when Højlund comes on the field and there's like look what he's capable of. And to be fair, I really did like his performance. I think he instantly got out there. There was not a Nunez type performance, but it felt a little bit more pressing, a little bit more chaotic, a little bit more like there was someone putting it on United and someone beyond Rashford to press the issue, if you like. And maybe just kind of a focal point where Martial's fine for that, but it's clearly not what Erik ten Hag in his final form wants.
No, and if you're going to be transitional, the irony is you often need a fairly immobile centre forward.
Right.
So, I mean, look, I don't want to make the comparison too directly, but Antonio for West Ham, he picks up the ball in his own half, and the first ball's always backwards. Yeah. They're the most transitional team in the Premier League in some ways, West Ham, as a percentage of their passes, etc. So that's the first point. But the second point is, I don't really understand why United are in the position where without a 20-year-old with a back injury, who's possibly brilliant and looked great, but we don't know if he's going to do it. He's kind of the great hope, which feels a couple of transfer windows away.
I feel like this couple of transfer windows thing is, I get what you're saying. A lot of money has been spent so far at United, though, and it's fair to say that I can't think of any signings that, weirdly, like all of the signings have maybe been made to fit. So Casemiro, you'd imagine, wasn't first choice, but also wasn't unwelcome. You'd imagine Amrabat, because of the nature of where he was signed in the window, wasn't first choice, but wasn't unwelcome. And I'd imagine the players who are unwelcome now know it. I mean, it's very clear within the squad there are players who are unwelcome and they know it.
Well, speaking of unwelcome players, the problem for me, at least with United spending, because you're right, they've spent £400 million. Which
is huge.
And to say then they're a couple of transfer windows away makes it feel like, well, hang on, what's happened to all the money?
Well, they had the centre-back pairing of Leicester from 2018-19. And like one of those in the side?
Yeah.
Great.
Sure.
Great. Oh, it's Johnny Evans come out to, close the game out. Oh, it's Harry Maguire come out to close out our careers.
They've taken big bets essentially on Anthony and Sancho. Because if you look at the
Sancho
money spent...
predates Ten Hag, though, and Anthony basically came in and went, I'll take that role. And weirdly, I guess because of his relationship with Ten Hag, Ten Hag kind of talked him round to playing the way that Ten Hag wants him to play.
Yeah, but the weird thing about Anthony is he was obviously signed for a non-transitional side.
Yeah.
Because he can't run as harsh, but he's not quick.
Sure.
Højlund
is, by the way.
Højlund is...
rapid.
I don't know what they feed them in Scandinavia, but...
so fast.
I
mean, he overtook Rashford the other day, and then Rashford decided to. Was it Rashford? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. Rashford decided cut inside or do something else.
The other point worth making on the weekend is
Rashford? Yeah.
Is United had at one point more than 2/3 of the ball.
Yeah.
Which at the Emirates is essentially unheard of for them because they go there and just sit. But Arteta was obviously trying to do something.
But the reason that they had that 2/3 of the ball was they were allowed 2/3 of the ball in their own half. Arsenal's press basically went, cool, we're just going to keep you in your own half and we'll win it back as soon as you get into the areas you want to be in.
Do you think they were worried about for Rashford?
In a way, well, I mean, rightly so, right? Because instantly, as soon as that ball came in, he scored a goal. Yeah. And I felt a bit bad for Ramsdale because I thought, well, Ramsdale actually got a hand to it, but it's just such a hard shot. And you've kind of let Rashford do everything he wants to. You can't really blame that on the keeper.
The goalkeeper's having a hand to it, but going in sometimes is an indication he's made a mistake.
Sure.
Other times it's like, well, he's full stretch.
Yeah.
And it's just, what do you want me to do?
What do you want me to do from there? You basically let him in the exact position he wants to be in to shoot. On top of that, I think the way that Manchester United were playing, so a lot of their passes were in their own half, very little. And in fact, Arsenal, even in the first half, when they had less of the possession or less passes, than Manchester, they had less possession and less passes. They have 44% of the possession, Arsenal, and 50 or 60 less passes, right? But so many more of them were in the United half. So many more of them were pressing the issue, controlling the game in the way that you would want to. Manchester United felt a lot more conservative, and that's where I felt maybe confused, right? What I felt was a really great phrase in Laurie Whitwell's summary of the game in The Athletic was the final sentence of the kind of opening set of paragraphs. Whereas the fixture last season saw Mikel Arteta's team overwhelm United, beating them with persistent sophistication, this was a much closer contest. But the persistent sophistication and the persistent the persistent nature of what Arsenal were doing won out in the end. Maybe because of persistence. I feel like
it's
there's something else in there.
Yeah, it's not quite right because it was persistent, but they were essentially doing the thing that the team has been designed to do and has done for the last 2 years, which is circulate the ball between the advanced eights and the wingers and make the pitch big. Right. United, I think the conservatism was in part, United don't have patterns of play this season at the edge of the box. It's not like, oh, we know the fullback jumps in or the advanced eight sticks there. They're much more...
We love seeing this thing happen, right?
Exactly, which is the ball over the top. So, I mean, Brighton, who are also extremely transitional, against West Ham said, okay, you have it. And they weren't sure how to break out of...
Right.
And United were doing the same to Arsenal. It just aesthetically felt weird, right? Because Arsenal so obviously dominate the ball most of the time. So it was strange for Arteta to just go, yeah, but unless Rashford's in behind...
And I totally get that. I guess my question here is now, I'm mixing two different subjects and I want to try and find the cocktail of what it is. I personally have questions. Why is it so complex what they're doing? Why sometimes does it feel almost overcomplicated when actually what they're trying to achieve feels quite simple? Maybe because they know there are more complex shapes they want to make. Maybe because they know the next form of Manchester United, like in terms of training, is 2 weeks away, or like, one international break away, or any of these kind of things. And then the second one is when Ten Hag says, I will fight for my ideas, right? And then he terminates Ronaldo's contract, essentially, drops Captain Maguire, punished Rashford for turning up late, took away David De Gea's contract and let him leave as a free agent, all in ruthless fashion. How much does that set a tone now in the side where when you then see Sancho post-game saying, please don't believe everything you read, I will not allow people saying things that is completely untrue. I have conducted myself in training very well this week. I believe there are other reasons for this matter that I won't go into. I've been a scapegoat for a long time, which isn't fair. All I want to do is play football with a smile on my face and contribute to the team. I respect all decisions that are made by the coaching staff. I play with fantastic players and grateful to do so. Which I know every week is a challenge. I will continue to fight for the badge no matter what. It seems... first of all, give me your read on that.
Well, firstly, fight for the badge is like we're having a bad moment. It's this European imported term.
Is it also... It's also the ultimate way of saying, I like the fans, I don't like the coach, or I disagree with the coach?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we don't know the ins and outs, obviously, of Sancho.
No.
Or really Ronaldo or De Gea, or Rashford or Maguire.
But we have ballparks.
Exactly. And the thing is, there's probably two sides to it. But the headline is Ten Hag has a very clear sense of what he wants.
Right.
And if United were winning every week, we would applaud that. So my question to you is, does the lack of results on a consistent basis change the tone of how we think about that ruthlessness?
I think if anything, you need to become more ruthless in this period as a set of fans. It's very easy when things are going well to say, oh, right, yeah, back this guy. I think the Sancho thing, you should side with, at every juncture here, Ronaldo side with Ten Hag. Maguire, obviously, you side with Ten Hag. Rashford, I think even Rashford sided with Ten Hag. De Gea, obviously, you side with Ten Hag, and now Sancho, you do the same. There isn't another route here where United come off better without Ten Hag and not better without Ronaldo, Maguire, Rashford obviously playing better, De Gea out the team, although we can talk about that in a second, and Onana, Sancho, and I'd imagine that the ushering out of the Greenwood scenario was not exactly, should we say, Ten Hag's preference. I think he probably wanted to conclude that much, much quicker.
Yeah, it just depends what you want. Because if you want essentially like a bunch of mercenaries for a season, who like will come together, but it's essentially like a Chelsea Champions League winning side. When every 5 years they just decide to finish 8th and win the European Cup. Sure, that's fine. But if you want to back a manager over a project, as Arteta has been backed, then I think all of those decisions you have to give license to Ten Hag to make, and just say to him, listen, Sancho, Ronaldo, Maguire, if you don't fancy them, they're out. The only thing I'd say about Sancho is, and I'm speculating and I don't for a second know this, it's just because he is so talented and the drop-off was so quick, I can't help but think maybe on some level, there's some, I'm clearly not referring to details, but with Dele Alli, he wasn't doing brilliantly off the pitch.
Yeah.
With Sancho, I just wonder the same and whether like there's an element of it's easy to dismiss Sancho as, oh, you should work harder in training. But if there's actually something a little bit more complicated going on there.
I totally understand that. And, I'm not saying you should take, I think siding with Ten Hag doesn't mean siding against Sancho in this scenario.
No, Ten Hag's still right here, by the way.
What Ten Hag said, I don't have the quote to hand, but the quote that I read in the article actually seemed pretty softly touched. Like, it seemed like pretty soft touch on what he was really saying about Sancho, which was basically, we just chose not to pick him because we don't feel he's been performing at the level we need him to in training. Now,
I also read somewhere like a remarkable statement on Instagram from Sancho, but it doesn't need to be remarkable. It's like people disagree all the time. It happens behind
this is
closed
clearly
doors.
not club sanctioned, I guess would be what a lot of people are saying. And I guess the problem is at the moment, and I think what we almost need to acknowledge is there is a pattern now at Manchester United which is emerging and has emerged continually, where there becomes a bit of a schism between the manager and some of the players. There comes a bit of a gap between where the manager believes the transfer should be and where the owners will either be willing to pay or not. And Manchester United fans, whether they won't think that Ten Hag should be sacked. They won't think, another manager already gone. But they will be sick of the same issues over and over and over again. And after a week where you've basically heard that the owners are sticking around, until they get 10 million, which isn't an unreasonable valuation of Manchester United, but also I would be interesting to see what a financial analyst says about their handling of the sale, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, football clubs, it's interesting. Like, the quickest way to become a millionaire owning a football club is to start as a billionaire, is the quote.
Right.
Unless you're the Glazers and you've bought United in 2005, I mean, whatever they sell and make, they're going to make Billions. Unspeakable money.
But what's weird about that is, and I totally get it, what's weird about that is, I feel like now what we're discovering is the whole time they didn't intend to sell.
Oh, that's so that, it's hard because on the one hand, it's easy to criticize, but that same value system from the Glazers that leads you to making like a slightly frustrating, counterintuitive decision is the same value system that obviously helped them accumulate their wealth. Like, they're just being themselves here.
Sure, but being wealthy, and this is what I think a lot of people have issues with, being wealthy doesn't qualify you in money management in every sector. It just means you, in an almost disproportionate way, got good at money management in a certain area. Doesn't mean all areas of life you'll be good at money management or that you'll have those same connections. They might have connections in other industries that are exceptional, right? And there might be people that they're very well respected by. I'd love to know the names of those people. But you get what I'm saying? Like, there's a disconnection here. But weirdly, they still own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I will remind you, though, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do start with a quarterback this season who sucks.
Well, this is it. I mean, people will say, what are the United fans complaining about? They've spent 400 million. Yeah, but the thing is, they bought the club, and this is not a story for today, but they bought the club with debt.
Yeah.
And then had the revenue of the club pay the debt.
Sure.
So they haven't spent a penny in real terms on Man United, and it sounds like they haven't spent a huge amount on their American football side either.
Well, I mean, they did spend something on their American football side, but I feel like it comes down to a lack of consistency, a lack of strategy, a lack of cohesion throughout the entire squad. And I think Manchester United fans are at the stage where they're just sick of the same old stuff over and over and over and over and over again.
What's the human behavior angle here, though? Because if you're the Glazers, you're old, you live in the States, and you have unlimited money.
Right.
Why do you need this?
Why do you even want this? Is it that really it is easier to do that away from home than it is at home? Is it easier to be like, yeah, screw these guys?
It's a fascinating. I mean, they don't go to games. They get only flack.
When they do go, no one likes it.
When they do go, there's just green and gold scarves knocking around. I mean, it's a fascinating question. But just to finish up on United, I'm interested. Do you think they get top 4 this year? Because they were widely predicted to. I can't remember what prediction you made, but I just felt
I said they got third.
Yeah, see, that was kind of the common. I think on the BBC they were third for basically everyone. But it feels early to me. Even if they'd won at Arsenal yesterday, I think I'd be saying. They seem to me they'll finish 6th with Spurs. And then next year, you'll go, oh, that's what they've been trying to do.
Yeah, I totally get that. I just think they can't afford to drop away at this point. They can't afford to not be in the Champions League. They can't, all of these things. But what's weird about it is, I don't know, they always seem on the cusp of something. They seem like this. There's almost a nearly element with Manchester United this every season right now.
Which is a product of spending so much money that you always have something in the squad, right?
Yeah, and I mean, their squad, that's my final kind of thought here is I'm not quite sure why they're playing this brand of football. I mean, he must be painfully aware of the fact that Aaron Wan-Bissaka's a right back. I thought Dillo had a pretty good game over the weekend, but maybe he doesn't feel he's fully capable of what he needs him to be capable of. You know, if you think about the players that he had at Ajax, it was like Ziyech.
You're right though, because on paper the Ajax side aren't as strong as United side.
No,
and he seems to be, as you say, painfully aware of their limitations.
Yeah,
because he's not attempting to play midfield triangles. He's essentially going, we play 4-5-1, but the wingers squeeze up, and we hit them on the break.
And Rashford's the most furthest forward player, which is almost more like a 4-4-2. But
there's almost a Mourinho-esque pessimism. I'm joking, kind of, but you're right. Like, why are they not trying to dominate the ball? Why are they backing off Wolves at home?
I'm not sure. And I felt, we had the Bruno conversation a couple of weeks ago. I think we're back at the same conversation with Bruno, where it's kind of like, go on then, like, do a bit of captaining.
We got in trouble for that.
Yeah, I know.
The thing about Bruno, and this is sort of the response, I'm the official spokesperson here.
He's default captain.
Of the Lozcast, official spokesperson here. The criticism with Bruno was never he's not a good footballer. Mm-hmm. It's that United are transitional, and in the transitional environment, what you want is someone to really just be the exemplar of influencing games of football when things are difficult.
Yeah.
And his record away from home and against big sides isn't that.
Well, Manchester United now have a very bad record, as everyone will be saying, against the top 10 in the Premier League. Top 10. Yeah, not even like top 4. That just slowly got thicker and thicker in terms of who it is that they're bad against. And do you know the one win in the last 10 games when they played the top 10 they've had that against? Fulham. And Fulham were 10th at the time.
I heard the stat. They got 1 point against the top 9 away from home last year.
Yeah. So that was I think they maybe got 1 draw, 1 win or something. So there's 1 point. Yeah, there was in the last couple of games they got.
Yeah, well, the thing was they had 1 point out of the 24 against the top 8. And then I think when you extend it to the top 9...
Well, yeah, you can just slowly keep making the pie bigger.
I was guilty of saying top 11 on YouTube the other day.
Oh, you need to be careful with...
There's only 20 sides. Top 11...
over half.
It's over
half of the Premier League. That's poor. Someone else says, is there a reason for growing your hair out? Is it a fashion choice? I'm listening to him after a while. I don't know what that means. The issue we haven't had a striker in the team, and I think this is it, is I don't think they've had a focal point. And I think the more that Højlund comes into the side, I think the better this team get. I think the more progressive they get, I think the easier it is to sort out your midfield. And I think with a more mobile striker, you've got someone you can hit alongside Rashford, alongside Antony, or even Sancho, or even Garnacho.
Which is why I think the conclusion is...
Mason Mount.
Yeah, well, so that's another conversation entirely. But I think the conclusion here is, given what you've just said, they're a transfer window or two away. Or at least they're in transition until players come back.
I think what's interesting is it's, Liverpool's front three didn't look the same without Firmino. Haaland is particularly important for Man City. Chelsea at the moment lack one striker. They're a striker away, really, from being a functional side. Spurs got rid of a striker and look way more functional. It's once you sort out that front line, and there's something there, is what I'm saying.
Do you want to just take this moment to respond to the hair questions? Because we get a few.
No, I'll respond to those another time. We'll do those as a special part of the podcast. In the next section of the podcast, we're going to be talking a little bit about Trent Alexander-Arnold. We're going to be looking a little bit at one other aspect of the game. And after that, we're going to be asking Jamie, what are you reading? I hope Manchester United fans were satisfied by part 1. We're interested to get your comments below. If you have thoughts and feedback on Manchester United, please put it down there. A team that, really had quite a conventional, pretty, easy win over the weekend was Liverpool. Villa didn't really turn up in the way that I think people were worried Villa would turn up this season. I think that's mostly injuries and probably a lack of kind of key players at that point. But you were interested in Trent, as I think most people are. But I think there's a couple.
Yeah, well, look, I know you obviously are a close watcher,
very close,
of Trent, and I just saw this thing where he was picking up the ball when Liverpool had it between Gomez and Matip. So Matip was on the right-hand side, and there was this subtle moment where they would swap. And it was almost as if he'd been told, listen, mate, you have a little bit more range picking up the ball in centre half, traditional centre half position. And it wasn't something that I had seen before, and I wanted to know whether it's something that you had spotted before or whether this was its debut.
I think there are different games where Trent gets kind of pushed either further forward due to Liverpool just being more in control, or slightly deeper where the backline need a little bit more support in terms of just distributing the ball, and maybe just a little bit more almost emotional support to get the ball out the back. McAllister was also very available. Szoboszlai, I think, he's making himself so key for Liverpool. It's fascinating to watch. And then Trent is taking this floating role where he basically goes wherever he wants and takes a bit more responsibility for the rhythm of the side. But what was fascinating was I think Trent just saw time and time again, there's a wide open ball if I just stand back here and just ping. I'll hit Luis Diaz, I'll hit Nunez, I'll hit Salah almost every time.
And there's a problem too, because if you decide, okay, well, we'll just put someone on Trent, you're now essentially having your centre forward mark their right back. And now there's space for McAllister. I mean, having your right back be this kind of less mobile and less defensively sound as you want, but he's a quarterback. We had when I think quarterbacks, I think Pirlo used to pick the ball up off the centre half.
Sure.
Alex Ferguson used to say he used to get the ball off the fullback and play it first time around the corner. We haven't seen a Premier League version of that in such an obvious way. And it gives Klopp this ace card that essentially no other Premier League team has. Because even João Cancelo, when he was at City, wasn't a quarterback.
No, yeah, he definitely has that range. I think Rodri maybe has that range, but Rodri's responsibilities are slightly different, so he doesn't have that same.
But Alexander-Arnold has the freedom, as you say, every time.
Just do what he wants.
He do what he wants. And Liverpool, and we've spoken, I think, last week on the pod, Liverpool being slightly in flux and developing and changing. Christ, having Alexander-Arnold, I mean, the only question really is, what do you do behind him? And my question to you is like...
I kind of enjoyed Joe Gomez. I thought Joe Gomez had a really good game. There was, Liverpool haven't conceded a goal while Virgil van Dijk's not been on the field.
Your centre-back partnership was Matip and Gomez there, which could have, had they not performed, looked a little like Maguire-Evans. But Villa, just to say on Villa, they haven't had a game this year that's ended within 3 goals. They got hammered on the first day.
Newcastle, yeah.
Then battered Everton. Played Aberdeen off the park twice. Then I don't think they've had a game with a 2-goal deficit yet.
And I think that that's kind of indicative of where they're at, right? So I wouldn't take too many conclusions from Liverpool beating them. I would take conclusions just from the nature of how Liverpool beat them rather than 3-0 easy.
How would you characterise that?
In that you can see a lot of Liverpool's shape, a lot of Liverpool's movement, a lot of Liverpool making up for the fact they don't have a 6-6, so they've got an 8 or 2 8s, maybe even 3 8s with Curtis Jones, McAllister. McAllister plays the deepest, but he's an 8, and Szoboszlai. And there's kind of like it's more vertical than it is horizontal. And basically they almost stand vertically, Szoboszlai and McAllister. And then if there's trouble that way, one of them will go that way. If there's trouble that way, one of them will go that way. And they'll kind of just divvy out, oh, you go here, you go here, you go there. And then Curtis Jones is almost this like floating element who can just give Liverpool width out to the left and support Robertson and all those guys. So it's pretty interesting to watch because it's 3 really intelligent midfielders who are reading the game as they go. It's easier to read a midfield though, where you're like, cool, these guys aren't doing what they need to do. We'll just keep pushing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Villa in theory were the worst team to face.
Yeah.
Because they're so good at defending. I mean, they haven't demonstrated that this year, by the way. But in theory, they're very good at defending and hitting on the counter.
Yeah.
So when I saw the lineups, I was slightly... Because in that centre-back pairing in midfield 3, there's not... 2 of them are centre-backs, but there's not really a confident defensive player in there.
There's no one in there that you would have said that person takes charge of defensive duties within this team,
and
right?
You then look at the Villa side and how they've been attacking and how they've been playing. I sort of thought Liverpool might need to pull one out the bag here, and it just wasn't like that.
I think Liverpool, there's almost no conclusions to make from the Villa game in terms of whether they're capable or not. It's just, is the system evolving? Is there an evident system? Yeah, and I don't know if we've seen... I don't know if you've seen that as fully formed. Every game we're seeing it form just a little bit more. We're also seeing the units, the passing, the understanding is just getting better and better and better, especially between people like Szoboszlai and Salah, or Szoboszlai and Trent, or there's like little units that I kind of broke down in my post-game analysis. And that those units are, the more they get to know each other, the better it is. Like the more they'll know, well, I defend this area, you defend that area. I think a lot of the time people think of it as roles, and it's hard to define specific roles for Szoboszlai, who's got such a spread out touch map. And
yeah, especially when like his role is in relationship with other players' roles, which themselves aren't static.
Right.
So you're a little bit like trying to define him, but you have to use labels. You say floater or attack. You end up finding it very difficult to say he plays in that part of the pitch.
Yeah. And that's kind of the point there, is he's good at these little like round the corner passes. He's good at little combination plays. He's always available.
Yeah.
Same as McAllister on his side as well. You'd almost have called those two the double pivot. And then Trent and, weirdly, like Trent and Curtis are almost playing their similar roles. But Curtis isn't about distribution. He's just about being in that area and doing a job in that area. There's weirdly like almost tethers on the field. So they like, I think we've spoken about this before on the podcast. There's like baseline players who are satisfying certain areas of the field and just make sure they're there. And then there's other players that float and they're given license to do so.
But I mean, it's funny because Klopp has essentially been forced into playing three relative floaters in central midfield.
Sure.
I know Curtis played the more tethered role, but he's not someone you would think of as the tethered man.
No.
It's interesting that Liverpool have actually adapted relatively fast. And it's also just interesting to me that if you do look at Trent again, he's kind of this extra weapon. Like, it's hard to deal with three floating midfield players when you're defending. And it's even harder when they pop the ball out the back.
Yeah.
And now Diaz is on his bike, and now the game's got bigger.
Salah's in that like weird area where it kind of occupies two centre back. It occupies a centre back and a full back. So the full back doesn't know whether to go for Salah or what Nunes is doing on the other side.
That was your famous Henderson, Salah, Trent triangle.
They've now kind of rejigged that a little bit, and Salah is just used as a, kind of a shorthand for where do you cover me?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, if Trent ends up not finding a role where he's exceptional at Liverpool,
which
it will be
kind of is already, but yeah.
Well, I hope so. But if he doesn't in the long term, because last year he obviously struggled, it'll be such a sad condemnation of football becoming overly collective and tactical. Because it seems so sad that someone like Cesc Fabregas wasn't getting into the Chelsea team, but Marcus Alonso was because he's 6'1" and runs.
Yeah.
And I find that Trent, to me, is the barometer of has football become overly collective?
Is it too much?
Is it too much such that players such as Trent can no longer flourish?
I'd be interested to know your thoughts on this. I mean, it's really just a very quick take that leads us really into the final section. In Italy, there is an investigation going on now for the Milan players singing after the Roma win. Apparently, the Italian FA have opened inquiry to determine if the song breaks rules because it's offensive to another club, which is Juve. Obviously, everyone always thinks about Juve. A lot of people claiming it's not. But what's weird about it is, and what I find strange about it, they're coming down very hard on players singing a song which is obviously offensive to, or potentially offensive to someone else. They were very slow to come down on the racism aspect in their own leagues. I mean, obviously we can laugh from the outside, but the Lukaku thing rumbled on for however long. Obviously in Spain there's similar issues. It's the bureaucracy of football and the kind of, I think we're seeing the priorities in each country now of just the bureaucratic elements at the top, just being like, here's what's important to us. And we're going to show that through punishing you in weird and creative ways.
And it's weirdly punitive. I mean, the thing I'd say about the racism in Italy is I don't understand the specific context of it, but my guess would be the guys at the top of the Italian FA are against racism clearly in theory.
That's a good theory.
In theory, but in practice, probably think of it as romantic would be too much, but nostalgic or part of the culture.
Right.
So therefore, they kind of this weird, reluctant, there's no evidence of racism, whereas everyone can hear it. And then when it comes to something like this, now guys, come on.
This is the culture. This is the culture we care about.
But my question to you is, do you think that's because they happen to be conservative around offensive chants?
I think it's more that they're conservative around the brand of the league, and I think they like care about the brand. But weirdly, I think a lot of people at the top of these things don't understand what is important to the brand in terms of the current market. I'm not saying the current market therefore has the right idea completely about, what should be important, right? Like racism is important, but also, whether singing offensive chants is a good or a bad thing is a whole other debate. But in football, it seems like the focus is just slightly off. And in the next section, I want to talk to you about your choice of reading this week, which I know it might sound weird and it's not a book club, but it kind of is. And why this debate we're having kind of crosses over with that.
Perfect.
So now we get to the part of the podcast where we say, Jamie, what are you reading?
Laurence, I am reading The Age of Football. By David Goldblatt.
The sub of that is The Global Game in the 21st Century.
Yeah, and it's people have described Inverting the Pyramid by Jonathan Wilson as encyclopedic.
Seminal.
I mean, it is seriously the best, one of the, if not the best thing I've ever read on football for tactics. Wow. This does a similar job on a higher level. It's not as...
It's more macro, isn't it? It's more of a cultural exploration than...
And I've been thinking about essentially nothing but football for 23 years.
Wow.
But
it's amazing because he's actually 19 years old. So
it was a long pregnancy.
It was a long gestation.
But the point about this book that I've so enjoyed and why I wanted to talk about it is because there are such huge macro angles.
Yeah.
And football's influence and its tentacles, not in an abstract way, in like a shit me that's tangible.
Right, like almost colonistic sort of. Yeah.
Exactly. And I just wouldn't have known. So the conversation we just had about Italy, obviously you had the Arab Spring, and these were countries, I mean, I think they focus on Libya. Libya was hugely oppressive in essentially every part of society apart from one, and that was the football ground.
Yeah.
And you had these young men standing who were essentially ultras, having taken the ultra energy from Southern Europe. They were like actively chanting against the state, doing things, some multiple of what would get you arrested on the street. And the government were fine with it. And there's this question, and this is what I've taken from the book really, is football has this social role clearly, and in some ways it's replaced religion. It's some imperfect proxy for community.
I think replace is maybe the wrong word, but I think
the decline of organized religion.
The decline of, so yeah, you're right. It's a symptom of the decline of the structures that we previously thought to be really important and possibly know now to be more important. I just wanted to make sure, because there'll be people who get upset about that, but that's not what you mean.
That's excellently put, because I don't mean it's gone religion bad. Oh, we've all agreed the football's good.
It's the same as when Nietzsche said God is dead. In no way was Nietzsche actually making the statement about God being dead in terms of the entity itself. He was talking about the ideas changing, morphing, or falling away.
Exactly, and then football replacing it in terms of we've stopped going to church, but attendances have risen.
Yeah, if that's how you think about gaps in society. And I totally understand that. And what's interesting about, so I read the previous version of this book, and I'm a massive David Goldblatt fan in the first place. I think he's almost like there's an Adam Curtis element of him in terms of his book writing. And I like his cynicism to an extent of things like organized anything, be it politics, be it religion, be it any of these things. Not because I'm like, down with those things, but I think every institution needs to be questioned. And I think in particular, he captures a lot of that. And in fact, Tim Adams, who wrote a review in The Guardian, actually wrote an equivalent about the EU referendum, which came after Roy Hodgson's England team ground out a 0-0 draw with Slovakia in advance of the last leg of England's last 16 of the 2016 tournament, and losing 2-1 to Iceland in a humiliating exit from the tournament. Like, he talks about if basically, would Brexit have happened if people felt better about the England national team?
Right, and does a certain pride of Britishness, or in this case Englishness, support it's confident enough to have a relationship with the European Union, as opposed to feeling perhaps like an outwards insecurity. The interesting question that I thought one of the interesting questions the book raised is what the role of identity in football is. Because traditionally we tend to think of it, at least in terms of clubs, as I like Everton, so I'm an Everton fan, right? Blue, good, red, bad. That's the high level.
In an almost tribal, exactly tribal.
But the fact that the mechanics are a little bit deeper than that. And in the case of the Arab Spring, protests were first predicted at football grounds. They were initially allowed at football grounds because it was viewed as, well, these are young men burning off some steam.
Right.
And the moments where different rival football fans in Egypt, who normally weren't even allowed to be in the same stadium, were the ringleaders of the revolts. And they were the ringleaders because they had the prior organization. They had the prior, it sounds very domestic, WhatsApp groups.
Yep. And also a geographical knowledge of, we know where this team is. We know who to reach there. We know about this city. We know about this
and they understood the relationship with the police, and they understood how to navigate policing. And okay, I'm going on
who
about
was safe and who wasn't.
Exactly, and I'm going on about the Arab Spring. But if you look at South Africa, or you look at, there's a huge amount on South Africa in the relationship between apartheid and football. The thing that I learnt really was to not be as flippant as I sometimes am.
Right.
Because I feel like, I've just finished rereading Fever Pitch for the 2000th time. And it's fun to be a little bit self-deprecating about one's relationship with football, especially when it's as out of whack as mine is, almost certainly. But the reach of the global game, like 100 years after being formalized, right, and the rules being thrown down in the pub and barns, is quite remarkable. And understanding why that is, one, why is it that a sport can make such a big impact? But two, exactly how does it become institutional? And how else does it interact with institutions?
Right. And that is particularly interesting. And I think there's another part of this which is basically about the extreme reach of global capitalism, the extreme reach of populism, should we say? And it's a bit of an evaluation of those things. And I think maybe since this book was written, we've slightly moved on, or weirdly, he's captured something which I think feels like, the only way I can describe it is I had some old professors in university who kind of described what the 70s and 80s was like, and then into the 90s and why that shaped now, and why there's a bit of a cultural lag. He's not describing where football is going, but he's describing where football has been. And
the really interesting thing about
how that shapes where it's going.
Right. And the interesting thing about that is we spoke last week about Bowley maybe seeing football as a totally different game commercially in the next 10 years than the other 19 owners in the Premier League. And the book has a very healthy cynicism about the commercialization of the game.
Right.
But the slightly dystopian thing maybe is, what if what's gone in the last 30 years, at least as far as Bowley is concerned, to tie this into today, is some shadow of what it should be?
Yeah.
And
what do you mean? As in, it's like a lurking shadow?
It's like a watered down version. Perhaps the second edition comes out in 10 years' time, where he writes, well, look, the cynicism I had, because the book starts with an overview of how commercial the game's got.
Yeah.
And it turns out that was pre-Premier League compared to where we're going.
And that's kind of what I'm talking, and obviously to an extent pre-Super League, though the fact that the Super League never really materialized. Weirdly, I still feel like there is a...
Is it lurking for you?
I think the Super League, or the energy of the Super League, is always lurking. It's it's like a bad guy in a film where it's okay, your last plan to blow up the world with the nukes didn't work. So he won't do the nukes again, all right? But he might do biohazards or something like that. And so there's another way of whoever it is that wants to get their output, the monetary output from the game, getting their money. I feel like the Glazers have kind of found it. Theirs is more like a smallpox that they're just sort of spreading in one area, and everyone's sort of going, oh, sucks to live there. But in a cynical sense, I think we'll see more and more people inflating the price of their own club. I'm not accusing them of artificially doing anything, but kind of taking money out of the game through leveraging the value, the populism, the jingoism, all these kind of things. Essentially, what the Glazers are doing is they are monetizing populism, but the popularity of the ideas that surround Manchester United.
And this is where you have this really interesting tension between legacy fans and new fans. because, Bowley has just cut the £10 subsidy for Chelsea fans on the bus. Now, that sounds very small fry, but it costs Chelsea £250,000 a year. So it's nothing. It's nothing. They've spent £1 billion. And it stops making away games affordable for a lot of people. And the argument has been, he actually sees legacy fans, the guys going on the bus to the away game, as an obstacle. They are a problem going forward because, as you say, there is this whole new wave of monetization about to happen. And the guys that care about kickoff times because they have to get back to West London are like so small fry financially. And I guess the question I have for you then is like, the cynicism that runs through the book, and I don't think it's unfair, by the way, but the cynicism that's definitely present.
I think and I also think it's not cynicism in the sense of like, oh, I don't like these people. Though I think he has a level of contempt for them. From the other books I've read, I've not obviously read this one, so I can't speak about this one. But the other books of his that I've read, there is a healthy level of separation from those people, and there is a journalistic type quality to it where it is actually evaluating them. I think it's something that's quite healthy, actually. What I like about his book in particular is that he manages not to do something that I feel a lot of people in the space do, where it's like, oh, I have a dog in the race or, a horse in the race, so I need to back this guy or that guy. It doesn't feel like he's really got much investment apart from maybe in the fans.
Yeah, I mean, there's one other thing, right? And this is, I haven't got across nearly as much as I should have done. It is such a detailed look at world football. I mean, just to, chapter 5, the fragmented worlds of Asian football. If you're interested in how the Brazilian league works and why it doesn't quite work, or how the J League looks radically different to football in Russia and why that is, and you're interested in the political undertones and the mechanics of that, it turns out things are universal. Nothing's new ever. So the type of beef that makes the Asian footballing world fragmented is visible in the pub in London, is visible on the school ground, is visible at Chelsea's board level. And it's just these universal currents manifesting in, the macro is always found in the micro.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really cool demonstration of that.
These are the kind of books that I love. It's really interesting to hear you talk about it. It's available. I'm going to put a link in the description and then people can read along with us. And obviously we can come back at some other point, chat maybe about follow-ups. If you do buy it, message me on Instagram, message Jamie, let us know that you're kind of invested or you're into it. There's like an affiliate link down in the description that you can go and take a look at. So the fact that we're advocating for the book kind of helps with the podcast. Go and take a look at it, or at least click the link and read the reviews, right? Thanks a lot, Jamie, for reviewing your book of the week.
Oh, thanks, Laurence. Anytime, mate.
Yeah. We'll see you guys for next time's podcast. I don't know, maybe we'll do another one soon. It's going to be weekly. We're trying to look at it twice a week, but it's just timing. Thanks for joining us on this podcast. We'll see you guys again real soon.